Hello, this is Joy Hancox of the Byrom projects, and here to tell you a little bit more of my ongoing story to do with my researches. Today I'm going to focus on Stonehenge, the English Heritage Monument. It's a focus for all kinds of people. I'm very privileged to be able to talk to you about this today. What I'm going to concentrate on at this stage is a monument that is outside the Stonehenge Museum. And it is a commemorative stone to two airmen who crashed their plane on the 5th, 6th of July 1912. I'm going to talk to you about that because although I've mentioned it before, I've got other things that I need to tell you today that will enhance your interest if you are going to Stonehenge and you see this monument. It is, as I say, a dedicated monument to two airmen who crashed their plane on the 5th of 6th of July 1912. And they were based at a nearby airfield called Lark Hill. And this airfield was newly formed for the Flying Corps, which was a new airfield dedicated to these young pilots who were devoting their expertise to that particular area. And these two airmen crashed their plane under very sad circumstances. And so this commemorative stone, you will see that one of the names on it is Captain Lorraine. Now it is Captain Lorraine that I want to focus on, although the other airman is in a way just as important to me. I realise that. But the reason why I'm talking about this at all is because I had published my hidden chapter in April 2011, and it was printed by a company called Choir Press, based at Gloucester. And after a few weeks of its publication, I received a phone call from the owner of the Choir Press, who wanted to check with me about a certain fact. And he had another client that had visited him for a meeting, and that client had been discussing, or it came about that they were discussing my hidden chapter. Miles Bailey telephoned me. He was the owner of Choir Press. He wanted to know whether I would be prepared to give my contact details to Vice Marshal Mr. Barry Newton. And of course I did, and Barry Newton, that he came to be known to me as, and I make no apology for calling him Barry Newton, even though that he was in a very elevated position, because he was also the equerry to the Queen Elizabeth II. And here he was wanting to talk to me. And this was because I had included quite a lot about the Lorraine family in the hidden chapter. He wondered how on earth I'd obtained some of the material that I had about the Lorraine family, and because he had not been able to contact many people of that name, and he thought it was very, very unusual that I was able to give certain details about the family. And now I of course, I was quite prepared to share some of that knowledge with him, and did, and he included it in his own publication, which was printed by the Choir Press of Gloucester. Now, actually, the reason why I was very interested myself in the Lorraine family, it was because I had had access to a very large volume of their family memoirs that were deposited privately in Manchester Central Library. Actually, the interest that I had in the Lorraine family was very, very highly focused, and I was very, very fortunate in looking at in the index of the catalogue of Manchester Central Library. I learned that they had a copy of these memoirs, and as I say, they were privately produced for the Lorraine family, and these were the Lorraine family of Kirkhall, and that's near Northumberland in the north of England. And so here I am having access to this very, very private memoirs in Manchester Central Library. But they were very, very kind there, the staff were, and they brought them up from the stacks on a trolley for me to look at. And they were over 350 pages. And so the Lorraines of Kirkhall were going back hundreds of years in this history, but it was privately produced and not available necessarily to the general public. How the Manchester Central Library had a copy of it, it's a very, very good library, and of course they had stored it, and I had now a copy of it. Now, why did I want it? And this is very, very important, and because I had been alerted to the Lorraine family years before, and I had been alerted to that family through the copy of the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And this is a very, very well-known book that had been published in the 1980s. And how had I got a copy of it in the first place? I was sent a copy of this book. I had not known about it before, and I had been sent it by Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley. And Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley was the grandson of the Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin. And through the family memoirs, I had been drawn to their attention because of the Byrom family, and certain members of the Byrom family went to work for the Baldwin family years before, after the death of Eleanor Atherton, whom we've talked about in earlier videos. Now, Miles Huntingdon Whiteley had sent me a copy of that book, and why had he sent it? Because there was part of that story that he thought was connected with John Byrom, whose name was not included anywhere in that book. Now, I'm not going to talk about that really, except that I came to know Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley very much over the years. So much so that his family, commissioned me to do the memoirs of Sir Stanley Baldwin's own daughter, Lady Lorna Howard. And I'm only mentioning it because I spent a lot of time with Lady Lorna, and as a matter of fact, that memoirs of hers has never been published because she died, and the family did not want the memoirs published at that particular time, and so there was a delay. And all that time, Sir Miles Huntingdon Whiteley kept in touch with me. And he did so to such a degree that he visited the Science Museum when I was studying the brass plates for the benefits of my research, but also for the benefit of the Science Museum in London. And he came with me to at one session with Sir Dr. Bill McCann. And as a result of that visit, he presented me with a model of the Elizabethan theatres. It was a model which I treasured for years and years and years. He remained in my visiting list until he died in 2019. And after I'd published the hidden chapter, as you would expect, around the time when Miles Bailey had got in touch with me about Barry Newton, here is Miles writing to me about my newly published book. And I'm going to read it to you because it's part of my archive at that time. And as it so happened, I had an accident, and I'm going to read it to you as it's written. I was most distressed to hear that you have joined the ranks of the walking wounded. Backs are tricky areas of the body, and I trust that the treatment you are having will bring you to full recovery. Now, I had told him all that because I'd had to mention it to Barry Newton as well. It was an old. I'd fallen off a horse in my early teens, and anyway, I'd mentioned that to Barry Newton in our conversation, just as a general conversation actually. But I will carry on reading the Sir Miles notelet here. I have much enjoyed reading the hidden chapter. Your writing style is such that I found it very hard to put it down, as your fascinating development of your researches kept me spellbound. Now, that is the sort of thing that Barry Newton picked up, and he spoke to me and on that evening, but he wrote to me about how rarefied the information that I'd spoken about in the Lorraine section of the book. And of course it was Miles Huntingdon Whiteley that persuaded me to pursue the Lorraine researches. And here he was writing to me in May 2012. That was shortly before the contact that I had with Barry Newton. So I realised that this was very pertinent contact, and it was very, very relevant, and there was a human quality about it that unless I'd have published the hidden chapter, I would not have had the privilege of helping Sir Barry Newton. And this was all as a result of my interest in the Lorraine family. Now, I'm going to ask the film company if they would show you the list of the Grand Masters of the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, because you would see that they go back to the 1200s, and in that list there are several named Lorraine family members. And so the Lorraine family became almost a fascination to me in a different way than my earlier researches had followed, because I had no idea about the monument outside Stonehenge, which takes me now to the next stage of my story. This part of the story is based at Tintern, and when I originally started my research, it was as a result of deciding or learning that Tom Siddle had lived in my property from 1729 till 1745, when he was executed. And this is all part of the Jacobite story. And Miles Huntington Whiteley knew all about this because Byrom himself was a friend of Thomas Siddle, and incidentally, I have to say that since these videos have been in the public domain, the direct descendant of Tom Siddle's daughter, Phoebe, has been in touch with me. And this is absolutely wonderful. This is why I'm doing these videos in the first place. So it's unsung history. And she does not live locally. She's written to me since, and she lives in a different part of the country. I won't say where, because I'm in contact with her, and I was absolutely delighted. I know that it's genuine because the daughter of Tom Siddle was named after the sister of John Byrom. So this is another part of the story, which is a sideline from what I'm going to say now. I'm going to Tintern, and I'm at the Church of St. Michael's. I had various projects done with companies based in London and in different parts of the country, Stratascan being one of them. And Stratascan carried out various surveys in connection with St. Michael's Church in Tintern. And one of these was a survey of the graveyard. And the reason why I wanted to do that is that I had learned that a previous rector and vicar of that church in the 19th century, had also been the chaplain of Bristol Royal Infirmary. And he was the vicar of St. Michael's Church for 3 months of the year, as well as being the chaplain of Bristol Royal Infirmary. And I had learned, and this is a proven fact because I went to the record office, he was called over the coals and reprimanded for being a grave robber. And his connections, it doesn't matter, I don't intend to discuss the details of that, They are written up in one of my books, but the fact is that I did have a survey done, carried out in the churchyard of St Michael's. Now, the Reverend Mays, this is what his name was, he was very long serving in St Michael's Church, but he finished his mission there and retired in 1870. And so what I am going to say now couldn't have been anything to do with his patch. And what I'm going to talk about is the Stratascan survey that was carried out in 2003. It's sufficient to say that I had another application to do further work in that graveyard, and I did not receive any decision about that, but that is another story. And in the meanwhile, the book, The Hidden Chapter, was in preparation, and I had this survey done and wrote about that survey in the Hidden Chapter. Now, the survey included a study of a particular section of that graveyard, and that was an enclosure which contained the burials of the warden at the time of his death of Tintern Abbey, and his name was John Lorraine Baldwin. A coincidence, I don't think he was a relation of Miles Huntingdon Whiteley, who was the grandson of Stanley Baldwin. That was a coincidence. But he turns out to be the second cousin of Eustace Lorraine, whose monument is outside Stonehenge. And I was absolutely amazed when I learned of the connection of John Lorraine Baldwin with Eustace Lorraine. How did I discover that? Because in the precious book that was published in 1902, the pedigree and memoirs of the family of Lorraine from Kirkall, his portrait was in that document. And so I knew that there was a close connection with Eustace Lorraine, whose monument was at Stonehenge. Now, going back to the survey that was carried out by Stratascan, the managing director was very, very active in participating in projects of this kind. And I shall always be grateful to him for the minutiae that he carried out in connection with some of my work. Now, when he completed this work, and I have a report here, and here's the report of Stratascan that covers the Russell Baldwin grave. Now, John Lorraine Baldwin's wife was Frances Russell, who was a member of the Bedford family. So she is buried with him in the enclosure and died in 1888, and he died in 1896, I'm sorry. And here is the report of the findings of Stratascan in that inquiry. Now, what happened was that I had already got a description of their funerals, which were very lavish indeed, which was reported in the Chepstow local paper. And I had acquired and got a copy of their funerals. And their funerals were conducted by no less than the royal undertaker Flashman, Queen Victoria's undertakers. And they arranged the funerals of these two, 8 years apart. Both of them had very lavish funerals. They were conducted by the company of undertakers who were the royal undertakers, Flashman and Company. And they arranged them in 1888 and 1896, 8 years apart. And I had acquired the description of the funerals and who had attended, and it was a very, both were very lavish funerals, and they were described in full in the local paper of Chepstow. And so I had copies of them, and I shared those funerals descriptions with Stratoscan. They knew about how lavish these funerals were and those that attended. The managing director was responsible, or is responsible, for the report of Stratoscan as indicated by the cover that I've already shown you. Now, within that document, there was a section that I chose to include in my own published book, The Hidden Chapter. And I'm going to read from page 192, and this is what it says. After reading the funeral accounts in the preceding chapter, the reader will be surprised to learn that, and here is the quote from the report, the fragmented discrete anomalies identified within the railed grave area do not correlate with the burials as suggested by the Chepstow Weekly Advertiser in 1888 and 1896, as there is no substantive evidence of two large coffins or brick vaulting within the radar data collected in this area. This may suggest that the anomalies identified within the radar survey do relate to some other form of activity taking place. I'm not going to comment on that, except to say that Stratoscan, a very, very professional company, would not have said that without good reason and without stating the facts as they have described in this quotation. And I do know that they took certain measures to investigate further, which are described in my book, but I do not necessarily think that it's important that those investigations need to be quoted here. I've said enough to do that. Now, what we have then is John Lorraine Baldwin. His coffin does not seem to be present in the railed environment of that churchyard. I cannot say what has happened to it. I do not know, and I have made no further investigations of radar to suggest what is the likely happening, or what happened to the enclosed coffin that was definitely there as described in the funeral of Shepstow. I'm not making any further comment on it except as a funeral, because I do not know what has happened, and I cannot venture to suggest where and what has happened to the coffins and burials as stated in the Chepstow reports. Sufficient to say, though, that John Lorraine Baldwin is a member of the same Lorraine family as the Eustace Lorraine monument outside the Stonehenge Museum. And now I have to add an aside almost, because this was what was going on in my mind. I knew that John Lorraine Baldwin's grave was not as straightforward as his memorial suggested. And yet his image and portrait was in the Lorraine book of special interest to me, that I had followed very, very closely. And one of the reasons, thank you to Sir Miles Hunding Whiteley, he had referred me to the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And actually, Eustace Lorraine, and I had rehearsed this very much in my previous books, and I've mentioned it in some of my videos as well. He had a younger brother called Percy Lorraine, and Percy Lorraine was very, very well known to Jean Cocteau. And I've talked about the memorial of Jean Cocteau in the French church in London, and where he has created an altarpiece in 1959. And I have also talked about an 1804 illustration which I bought, that I have interpreted as of Jean Cocteau's own hand, and at the same time as he was creating the altarpiece in the French church in London. That's a repeat, 1959. And then I traced and have used Jean Cocteau's own memorial in France, in his home, and in his own memorial he has used what I consider is an image of Percy Lorraine, Eustace Lorraine's brother, and he has encased it in a memorial of his own and an image of Percy Lorraine, which he also used in the creation of the altarpiece in the French church. And because I think that Jean Cocteau, who was the Grand Master of the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, and we have produced the Grand Master list, which he is elected in 1918 at the end of the Second World War, and actually he died in 1963, and Percy Lorraine died 2 years earlier, and he was the younger brother of Eustace Lorraine. So here we have if you like, 3 members of the exclusive Lorraine family based in my story, figured in my story of Tintern, and then Stonehenge. And I can honestly say that this has emerged a step at a time. I had no idea that it was likely to be such and so involved as to say 3 members of the same Lorraine family have figured closely in my research. And so we are entering the 3rd part of this video, and I have to say that I want to say that various people over the years have sought to visit me from time to time about aspects of my research. Not always from this country, as will have been reported in earlier videos. But I did receive a visit from a retired architect in 2025, about a year ago. And he had contacted me as a result of my interpretation of the drawings connected with the globe in London. And he came to visit me. It's practically a year ago now, and it was a very, very interesting day. And I have to say that his skills were remarkable, and he had a particular knowledge of the Kabbalists and sacred geometry and various other exclusive details that he shared with me in correspondence. And so, but it was a very, very professional visit, and he had copies of some of my books, including the Byrom collection, but not all. And he was so interesting, his visit was so interesting to me, and his papers that he kindly sent to me were so detailed that I gave him, at the time of his visit, the other copies of my books that he had not got. And subsequently he wrote to me and said that he had not known that he may have family connections with Tintern himself. And it seemed to come as a surprise to him, but he did not elaborate on it, apart from, in principle, he said that he thought that he mentioned a particular period in time, and that went back centuries. And so, as with a lot of people that visit me, I was really rather curious as to his supposed connection with, or suggested connection with, Tintern. And so, actually, I'm a member of Ancestry.com, and internationally so. I have a world membership, and so on this particular occasion, I thought I would look at electoral rolls and various other investigative procedures that I could follow in a general way without troubling him, to see whether there was any likely connection. And as I say, I'm not mentioning him by name because that's not necessary for this particular purpose. But whilst investigating Ancestry.com, I came across an entry and one of my assistants, research assistants, was with me at the time, and we came across the name of Lodge, Oliver Lodge. In looking at that, I knew that Oliver Lodge had rented Nurtons from the year of the Eustace Lorraine crash in 1912. Oliver Lodge had rented Nurtons for his son, Oliver Lodge, both of the same name. And Oliver Lodge Sr., of course, is the physicist and the founder member, along with others, of the radio. And what I suddenly confronted me in an electoral role of which I had absolutely no idea. I had always concentrated on the son's involvement in Nurtons, and I had investigated him to a very detailed degree, and knew that he was, or suggested that he was responsible for one of the allegories that I had presented on an earlier video. And here I am looking at an electoral roll which showed that Oliver Lodge Sr. had retired to a house within a stone's throw of Stonehenge. I was absolutely amazed. I had no idea that Oliver Lodge had moved and retired to Stonehenge, a Normanton house near Pewsey, and within a short distance of Stonehenge itself. And what is more, I had been looking at the 1939 electoral roll, and what do I see? That the Nurtons, Oliver Lodge, had moved in with his father. And Oliver Lodge died in 1939, within a few months of 1940, actually. And so he had, I discovered, moved into that area in 1920. So he had been there for 20 years. How long his son had been there, I can't say. But both of them and another member of the family are buried in the nearby church of St. Michael's. And so I needed to look into this. And I only did so because his discoveries connected with the radio coincided with the George Sassoon book that he wrote about the coding of the radio. And he also lived nearby. What is the interest, and why do these pioneers of electromagnetic fields, and who are responsible for pioneer work in connection with radios, why do they need and why do they choose to live near Stonehenge? What was the reason for that? Now, I learned, and I have this book, Sir Oliver Lodge, here in front of me, written by W.P. Jolly, and it says in this book of careful research by this American that Oliver Lodge had his own laboratory in Normanton House. He had his own laboratory. And actually, I'm reading from page 231 of this book, where Einstein visited England in 1933 and Lodge met him in Oxford. So our Oliver Lodge, physicist, spiritualist, and radio pioneer, had met Einstein in Oxford, who specialized in relativity. And I have spent a long time studying these people, and since discovering their whereabouts. And I am absolutely certain now that my journey is almost I'm working along and walking along the yellow brick road, because I had no idea that the Lodge family of Nurtons, of whom I have spent 20 years studying their history and the history of that site, I had no idea that these members of this family had moved to Stonehenge. Now, Stonehenge has again emerged as a necessity in my work. I am amazed at the connections of the crop circles with the story as it unfolds, because it's as though I'm being led in some way by some force that knows the story before I tell it. And I have explained how I come by some of these stories, but I have researched that area for 5 years in great detail, and I am absolutely surprised at the connections with the design of the Globe Theatre, because, if you like, George Sassoon was talking about the manna machine, which I've talked about in connection with the Ark of the Covenant being part of the design of the globe as I interpreted it. And now I also am alerting you to the Rothschild family, who owned acres and acres and acres of that area, not too far from Pusey and Lark Hill, and the Pusey estates are figured in a very pronounced way in the story of my unfolding of crop circles. I know that that area has very, very, very sensitive military places. We have heard about the Lark Hill crash to do with the airfields, and these connections seem to trigger memories of the Lorraine family, for instance, and now the Lodge family, and the Sassoon family. And these families are all very, have heritages there. This is very, very, very close to Stonehenge. And actually, now I have, well, it's not recent, but I have learnt that there is a very, very serious investigation going into the earlier history of Stonehenge itself, using radar work and various other expertise. And now we are learning that Stonehenge is not necessarily all that it seems on the surface. There are various traditions and conventions that suggest that it goes back thousands of years. And what I am saying is, in my innocence, I have performed and arrived at Stonehenge quite innocently. And actually, I choose to say this now at the closure of my video today, that I had not heard of crop circles. I had not heard, I knew of Stonehenge, of course, but I have not visited there, and I've not visited any of the crop circles. I have collected my data factually as it's happened, as I've been forewarned. I think it is there is some force that is advising me what to think and what to do, and stepping stones along the way. And it's not finished yet. And I have to say that I was first alerted to this by the carpenter. And he actually told me, and I've mentioned it before several times, and I'm not going to read it again, but he told me that I was being alerted to by an alien force that knew that I understood the numerology. And that is what I am saying today, that it seems as though that my geometry takes me further into the understanding of what is an incredible force, and an advice that isn't going to stop. I'm going to carry on. Thank you for watching.